some people have developed really good tools and really good tricks and really good templates. Like you can give them something and they're like, oh, I know what you need for this. Boom, boom, bang, this sound bank, this texture, and it's done an hour later, right? And I'm sitting there being like, what's the artistic purpose of this video?
What's up, everybody? Happy Valentine's Day. Though every day is Valentine's Day in the Hope Litwin residence. I am a daily chocolate eater, daily bubble bath taker. It's just Valentine's Day from here to the end, y'all. So today we've got Marie-Claire on, and I met Marie-Claire at Banff, the Banff Center for the Arts in Canada, and this time last year, actually, we were both composers in residence with Pro Choral Canada, and we got to spend, I think it was like 3.5, 4 weeks there, writing new pieces for Pro Choral Canada, and it was life-changing. It was like the best residency I've ever had. Also, for those of you who have not been to Banff, it is stunningly beautiful. So, I know that she's new to these, so I want to make sure she can get on. But as you guys know, there is only less than 24 hours to sign up for the Songwriters Lab. So the Songwriters Lab is a 12-week course that I put together to teach you how to write your own songs and to get your songs completed. Hey, Marie-Claire. Go ahead and request join whenever you're ready. Awesome. And yeah, we work through, we've got weekly master classes, we've got Facebook group discussions, we've got Voxer Access, daily Voxer Access with me, which is like a walkie-talkie app. We've got video tutorials. I put together a ton of trainings. It's like the full package. We're going to go all in. And then we work with Julia Cameron's The Artist Way to do deep transformational work too, because I think it's all one. Like, writer's block is not just write more. That's not always the answer. Sometimes you gotta like do some journaling, do some deeper work to get to the good stuff. What's up?
Hi.
Oh, I just swiped up. Now I can't see your face. Okay, now I can see your
Oh
face.
no.
I see
Okay.
you. What's up?
Okay,
How
great.
are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Where are you at right now? Is this home?
This is home. I'm in Montreal, and I'm next to my very, very cluttered desk that you will not see for the moment.
Okay. I was hoping you would
Or
say
you
like
could.
fluffy cat or something.
Oh, I wish that would be. Yeah, we're not there yet. We're thinking
No,
about it, but
no fur babies yet.
no fur babies yet.
But soon. Okay, I'm gonna try taking I'm playing around with like headphone stuff. I don't know. Let me just turn it down. Okay,
No problem. I'm probably gonna be
moving things around.
playing things around. Yeah.
Well, welcome. I was just kind of
Hi.
saying ahead of time, we met at Banff this time last year, which is crazy. Doesn't it like blow your mind that like the last
It
thing
was a
that
year ago.
well, and not just a year ago, but like the last thing we did before a global shutdown was like spend nearly every hour of the day with like 5 different choirs in a giant room. It's so weird. It's like going
Yeah.
from like 500 people in one room every day, at least for the last week or so, to like
Nothing.
so
Yeah.
weird. Yeah.
No. I obviously we're like we would have been going into our second week of intense music writing training in Banff right now. This is when we would have been given our tasks and started isolating ourselves into our little individual huts where
Yeah.
no one would see us while we try to write music really fast during the span of a week.
Super fast. Do you like
Yeah.
writing music super fast? Is it preferable to just like have deadlines and get it over with?
Yes.
Mhm.
I need that. I'm one of
Mhm.
those people that does it. If I were given the choice, as I was given during the pandemic at the beginning anyway, I will do nothing. I will
Right.
do nothing with my life, which is sad. I need goals. I need a purpose. And when I when I'm not given that, I become a blob that I'm not proud of. So yes, I'm writing it as fast as I did as Banff, though. I cut it kind of close, but so maybe not 4 days for me, and like it took me a while to get started for me.
I love the piece that you wrote, though. I was actually just thinking, I was remembering that we kind of like made a pact with each other where I was like, I don't believe in words anymore, or some stupid bullshit, whatever I was saying. I mean, I believed it at the time, but like, you know, whatever, hope, whatever. And then I think you were like, all I ever do is words. So we like gave each other the opposite assignments. Like you write something without words and I'll write something that's all words. And we actually did our assignments very well.
We did.
Basically all words.
Yeah.
And you explain the piece that you made, because I don't know if I could do it justice, but I loved it.
Do I remember the quote? There was a quote. It was when a thought of war comes, oppose it with a stronger thought of love. Oh no, I don't remember it properly, but that's the first half, and that's the idea. So it's like it's the idea of love against war and peace against hate, and it just reminded me. This is by someone called Abdul Baha from Iran, and he.
What's the name again?
Oh, sorry, Abdul Baha.
Abdul Baha. Okay, I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, and he so he's got a lot of really inspiring writings. I personally find a lot of them are hard to set to music though. So I really enjoyed taking the idea of the text and put it into music without having my usual challenges of how do I stuff the rhythm of the text into the music, which is hard. We can talk about this later, especially when it's not my own text. So this time it was sitting down and being like, okay, what is the quote saying? And it just went into the whole idea of meditation too, because this is not, it's a council of opposing a thought of war. So it's not like go out and destroy war physically. It was like when you have a thought of war in your head, you gotta nip it in the bud. And this is not like, oh, I've nipped my one thought of war.
Right.
That was going to happen in my life.
And then she lived happily ever after.
It's constant, right? So I thought, okay, well, and this was fun because we had, I'm jumping all over the place. I'll talk about this in a few seconds. So my idea was to just oppose love, war and peace and love and hate in music. So I wanted to start with a very peaceful kind of setting and then have war somehow come out of it to have a really intense war section where finally it would be taken over by peace. Yeah. But how in the world do you do that musically? And this was one of my favorite parts about Banff is that we were 5 composers and 5 conductors, right? So from around a good part of the world, mostly, I'd say mostly North America and Europe and a bit of, wait, Neta's from Israel, yes, but she's living in right now, yeah. So, and so we had the whole week off to write our music, and the conductors had private lessons to learn more about conducting technique. But we so wanted to keep working together that the 10 of us decided, no, we're going to be really intense and keep meeting every evening and go over our sketches and talk about it. And I think this has been the most uplifting, critical sessions I've ever had with people, where people would sit down and sing through our music and go, what about this? What are you trying to say about that? Do you think maybe you could do it this way? Like, we were so honest with each other, and we weren't like we were being vulnerable and not being
a high level of trust was definitely built.
Yes.
Up. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I remember at one point somebody asked the question of like, okay, but when war is won, is it like one forever? I think it was Henrik who said that, and I was like, oh no, of course it's not. Oh, I need to reflect that in my piece. And like I think Brian said like, oh, I don't know if hate, war just comes out of there. It needs to come out of something else. So it was like, okay, so it comes out of hate, but where does hate come from? It comes out of fear. So I have a moment where where I have it's super peaceful, and then I have the basses come in being like nice low chord for a chord change, and then I have a tenor going like who's scared, and then I have this like hate kind of texture coming in of like and then that kind of throws everything into chaos. So but I would have never had these ideas had we not discussed as a group. It was incredible.
That was so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of like ways to, well, I guess that's what I'm trying to do with these labs that I'm running, but just kind of like ways to recreate that kind of a supportive environment. Like,
Yeah.
because yeah, there's like nothing that beats that.
It's, yeah.
So you've been writing music for a long time. So for people who don't know, like your back, do you want to give a quick rundown in whatever fashion you'd like to about like?
Sure. Yeah. Rundown. So my mom was a singer-songwriter.
Yeah. It starts even before you were born. It's so true.
In utero, I was covered in music.
Yeah.
But I was the kind of kid, I didn't do songwriting for some reason. I was like, I want to play violin. And then the next month I thought it was like, I want to play cello. And then it was like, I want to play harp. So mom was like, no, you started violin, you keep violin. So I don't call myself a violinist per se, because it's my tool, it's my instrument, but it's not like, it was clear to me from the beginning, like it wasn't the love of the instrument, it was the love of creating music and playing with other people, right? So, but I never did songwriting until, again, I'm going to go back into that in a moment. So I did more performance, and as I grew older, I also did traditional music on the side. French
and
Canadian.
what kind of traditional music?
Right.
For people
so French
who are
Canadian,
all over the world.
Yes. So French Canadian traditional music, which is highly influenced by Celtic music because of the immigration of Irish and Scottish into the French Canadian areas, and also just like basic French traditional music too is kind of melded into that.
Do you kind of know when that happened, or like how that happened?
Yeah, so the Scottish started to immigrate, if I'm like in late 1700s, like 1780 something, or 1780, 90. So that was more in the Nova Scotia area. Okay. And then the Irish immigrated around, well, there was a big wave in 1847 when there was the potato famine, where there was a bug that kind of destroyed a lot of the potato harvest, and that was their main source of food, and they were just starving to death. So a lot of them immigrated to Quebec. 40 to 50% of Quebecers, we actually have Irish blood, which a lot of us don't know about.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
So when people are saying, there's this quote, we say pure laine, so pure wool, I guess, like, I'm a pure Quebecer. You're like, are you really? Are you really? You can probably trace yourself to like one of the first lineage of the first people who arrived, because they're great, like, records of it. I can find, like, but it's really funny because I tried doing it like the family tree, and then it kind of all comes back to the same people. I'm like, oh, we're inbred. So it's great that the Irish know more variety, and then of course everybody else is coming now. The definition of French Canadian is going to change, is gradually changing. There's also Quebecers and French Canadian and Acadian. It's a mess. Anyway,
so I only spent, I think, like 3 days in Quebec. And I had one of the best meals I've ever eaten in my life there. Just this like I don't even know if it was a well-known spot or anything. Like it was kind of upscale-ish, and we went for like a special family dinner type thing. So it was a special place, but it wasn't like well-known necessarily or anything. But I actually remember, I think I was 17 or 16. I wrote a note to the chef. Like I was so impressed that I like wrote on my napkin, like, here's how much this meal meant to me and my family, and like, thank you so much. And it's so funny looking back. I'm like, who does that? like a teenage girl, like this meal like changed my life. Like, I just want you to know, on the back of this napkin. So that's a good memory, is like food. Wow. And then I weirdly heard, I was staying in a hotel, and in the lounge area they had a jazz duo. Or maybe it was a trio. I can't remember. It was very like American style jazz. Astonishingly good. Like, and coming from like living in Chicago, like I know jazz because it's around me all the time. So my ear is very finely attuned to like, and often when I hear other people who aren't raised in jazz like attempt it, you can kind of hear, you're like, oh, that's interesting. That's like an accent. You kind of like hear their accent. No accent, no musical accent, just like so amazing. Like I still follow them actually on social media from like just seeing them play in a lounge when I was like 16. And give
me their info if you can.
Yeah, I will.
I'd like to see who it was.
Yeah, okay. I'll
my husband
track them down.
So
that's right. Your husband is a jazz pianist.
So maybe It is a small community, jazz community in like Montreal, Quebec. So it's and there's some really good musicians. I didn't know squat
Super
about
good
jazz until I heard.
musicians. Yeah. And I like, how do
Yeah.
they train? Is there a certain school in Quebec that's like known for their jazz, or?
I mean, McGill's very active. There's
Okay.
what we have in Quebec is we have kind of a college between high school and university, 2-year college or 3 or whatever.
Okay.
Anyone can take it. Like as long as they have a high school diploma, you can go there. And high school stops at grade 11. So it's kind of like grade 12, and then like that's grade 13 / first year of university. But it's just that you can really focus on what you want as a career. And there's Vanier College that has some good active jazz. I'm partial. I say that because that's where my husband teaches. And there's a lot like at Concordia. There's good jazz. At McGill, there's good jazz. I'm probably going to get smacked if there's good jazz at any of the other schools we have in Montreal. All I know is that there is a good community. There's good like spots to jam. I know that it's really hard because a lot of the spots where people would jam have gradually been closing even before the pandemic. So that's really frustrating. But yeah, it's just, I think it's more like, sure, there are the schools, and then there's just the communities around them that keep it alive, just like any other style of music, I guess.
Yeah. Quebec is interesting. Like, I obviously I was only there for 3 days, but it felt like a very small city comparatively, but so like full of art.
Yeah.
Like, exploding with incredible artists, but such a tiny city.
Yes. That is Quebec City. Montreal is similar to that too. Montreal is a little more frenetic as a feeling too. It's like high energy all the time, and you feel it living here. It's a little exhausting, but there's a lot happening artistically of all kinds of art. Circus art is really strong up here too.
What kind?
Circus art. So Cirque du Soleil comes from here.
Yeah.
It comes from Quebec, actually, Quebec City.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just like a weird energetic vortex, or do you think certain things were put in place that like people respect artists more? I've been having this conversation in my head recently as I've been, like, obviously with the shutdown, we've had to shift how we like make money, like from touring musician or like choral artist. So I've been working on like learning more about internet marketing and like how to translate things to online platforms and stuff. But as I've been doing that, I'm like, I kind of just put my head down and just learned it. Cause I was like, okay, this, like, I immediately have to figure out a pivot. But more recently, as like my head's kind of been coming up, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what is this all for? Like, I guess, and I at first I was like, is it my culture that's the problem, where like Americans are so obsessed with money? Well, I know not just Americans, but like we're so wealth obsessed, like just have a ton of cash. And I'm like, well, what for? Like, what's so impressive about money? Like when I'm feeling really dark or really isolated or really confused, I always turn to music. So like, and in the last couple of days, I like rediscovered some Stevie Wonder records I always loved. And they're like literally therapy to me. They're like, they're saving my psyche. They're like, and I'm like, no amount of money can buy this. I mean, I know it costs money to make that for him. So it's not, but I'm in my brain, I'm like, we've got to fix our hierarchy because it's not true. Like there's just no truth in the foundation of like money. And I know I knew that when I was younger. Somehow I just inherently knew, and I was like, I'm dedicating my life and devoting my life to the arts. For some reason, early, like 2 years old, I just like made that declamation to everybody who I would meet. It's just like, I'm an artist.
Like,
that's
amazing.
Okay. But I don't know, it's maybe partly is like pandemic, like immediate shift for survival is part of it. But then I think part of it is like growing into your 30s and having a lot of work behind you, but still a lot of work ahead of you, and trying to make this decision about like, how do I want to integrate into my culture? Like, I want to make the rules now instead of feeling like, oh, what should I be doing? Because I think school can kind of do that too a little bit. And then trying to get your feet under you with how to just like pay to live in a house and eat food does that to you a little bit. You're like, well, what does one have to do to like eat food here? But then once those things are kind of set, you're like, okay, grateful definitely to like be able to eat and have a roof over my head, but my entire identity was wrapped up in like devoting my life to the arts, and that's kind of all I want to do. So how do I, or I don't know, do you have this conversation in your head? Like, I don't have an answer. I just kind of like,
Well, so I am married to a musician, so I don't have these conversations in my head. I have it with the person I live with, because we're like, just yesterday we were walking and we're like, but like art is so not valued. So you were asking about Quebec City and like why does this art is like bubbling? And I don't know if it has to do, because it's a small community, there's a star system also here, just like in the States, but like smaller. So like you have all kinds of stars that people know here, like singers and actors, and so there's just this strong cultural identity that forced people people realize that art was part of that identity. Now it doesn't mean that we're paid better; it just means that it's appreciated. But then, yeah, Chad and I were thinking of like, oh my gosh, like how like we're looking at European communities where, or like in certain days, like what do you do? How can you declare yourself as an artist and make that your career? And you can be like hired by someone or paid or patroned by someone. And then you go back to like King's Courts where they would patron someone who were like, that's not quite what we want either.
Right. You leave your post and you're assassinated. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a whole problem of like, well, you have to develop your art for it to be appreciated by the community around you. There's this period of time when your art, you just have to do so much of it before you finally get something that you're like, oh, okay, this is worth sharing with others. Well, those years to develop it, you need to focus on it. But we need to eat, we need to sleep under a roof. And those are the most precarious years, like the first 10 years, 15 years. Like if you can survive that, and we were just talking about this, the biggest problem is that we find a lot of artists, and we don't talk about this enough, you have to have means. You have to have some amount of privilege to be able to become an artist. Now that can be familial privilege where your family supports you, even if you're not rich. If your family supports you, a lot of people around you helping you is helpful. Or you can have one family member or someone not in your family who is rich and who's like not patronizing, but being your patron in the sense of like pay you your way through school so you don't have to work 2 jobs while you're at school. Part of the art is to practice it constantly. You can't practice your art if you're scrubbing floors all the time and trying to like survive.
Right.
So it's like so many good artists never make it to being a career artist because they have to live, they have to survive. And it's rough. So I have a family who, like I said, my mom was a singer-songwriter, and my dad's a visual artist. He paints, and his job was a high school teacher. But he retired early, and he like basically my parents were like, yes, arts, but do it right. Also known as study it and make sure you want to do it. But we're going to be there, like we are your security net. Anything happens. And like now I'm married to Chad and his parents are the same. So we're like, well, double security. We're very stubborn where we try to pay for everything ourselves. We haven't reached out. We've reached out a couple of times early on. I know I personally reached out a lot coming out of university, but it's been a few years now that we're like, no, we can do this. If we have debt, we can deal with it, stuff like that. I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah.
Why am I talking about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's some reality for people. And it's interesting too to hear you talk about this because in my opinion, you're one of the best choral composers like around.
And I have work. I'm lucky.
And you have work.
I'm
yeah.
really
Yeah. And
I've only been for 3 years and a half, 4 years. Before then,
yeah. So when you told me a little bit about this when we first met, but like when you just got out of school, so you went to undergrad for composition or no?
Yeah, for composition.
Okay. Yeah. Like classical music composition, chamber music style.
My dream was to write music for film.
Right.
And I thought I'm just going to go and, do a bachelor's in composition and figure it out as I go through that. I didn't figure it out. But there was a class I took in my last semester that was film music, and I had fun. I enjoyed it. And those same teachers that were doing that class, they went to another university and developed a master's degree in multimedia and film scoring. So I jumped into that. My biggest problem is that I'm very tunnel vision. So I was tunnel visioning. Okay, I'm gonna get the best marks. I'm gonna do good projects, good work, and somehow I'm going to do film music. And that's not how it works. You go out and you meet filmmakers. You go
right. It's a lot of people, meeting people, talking with people. Yeah.
It's being part, and it's more than just talking to people. It's being like active part of the community, and not in a superficial way. You are part of the community. You're there because you want to be there, and people around you feel that. So I was not part of the film community. I tried to reach out sometimes, but I was scared. I was stressed out of my mind, being like, I have to eat. I need film gigs. I had one client because one of my neighbors, I had no idea, but Louis Defier, he is a film editor. I didn't know that. I was just hanging out to like have actually a very like a devotional spiritual evening with him and other neighbors, and just like getting to know our community, which is great. And then after that, he's like, yeah, I'm a film editor. Want to do stuff with me sometimes? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he had like a youth group. He was editing a film that these.
Is this all part of the Baha'i temple that you're part of?
Oh yeah, it's not a temple though, but it's a Baha'i community, yeah. But the kids, there's just this kids that did this ghost story, and it was a 20-minute little film, and he's like, oh, why don't you do the music for this? And I'm like, I don't have any projects. I'm hungry and I'm working at a grocery store. Sure. And hi, Katie. And it's our Katie. It's our friend from Banff. She was another conductor from. Hey.
I got lost in your story and I forgot people were coming in to join us. Whoops, waving at everyone now, retroactively waving.
I don't even know how to do that. Right. Anyway, so I did a little ghost story with the kids, and then what I didn't know is that the director of that film is actually someone who produces a lot of videos for like nonprofit organizations and grassroots projects and things like that. And he was like, hey, we're kind of bored with our music libraries online and everything. Would you like to write music for us? So that was like half my monthly income was with that one client I had for 5 years, which is amazing. There are some things that I did there that I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do.
Right. What's an example of what not to do?
Don't assume that because you're doing a video about Vietnam that you can just go and be like, I'm going to find music that is Vietnamese and study this instrument for a few days, and I'm going to make a track with that. And then before you submit it, some of the editors listen to it and they're like, yeah, that type of music is actually a funeral march. Did you know that? That's when I learned what cultural appropriation was, and went, oh crap. I just got so focused on like the actual quality of the sound and everything that I didn't even think about cultural meaning. And then at that point, I was like, okay, things to learn. So that was interesting. But another thing that I really learned is that I don't have the temperament for the hustle that you have to do. I just don't. And inevitably
it can be very conveyor belty.
Yeah, and some people have developed really good tools and really good tricks and really good templates. Like you can give them something and they're like, oh, I know what you need for this. Boom, boom, bang, this sound bank, this texture, and it's done an hour later, right? And I'm sitting there being like, what's the artistic purpose of this video? Okay, I'm not meant for this. I relate. Yeah. So meanwhile, that was my first 5 years after my master's. And meanwhile, during my last year of my master's, I joined a choir because I'd gotten a piece published by pure accident with Boozy and Hawks, which is a really big editor. I'd written something in high school, and somebody who is published by Boozy and Hawks was like, oh, this is great. And he somehow got me published. It was amazing. So because of that, when it finally hit the stands, I had people all of a sudden writing to me being like, can I commission you a piece for choir? And I was like, what the what?
Wow. What piece was that? What was the first Boozy and Hawks piece?
Le Train d'Hiver, which is a winter train, and I'd never been part of a choir before, and somehow I still managed to make it work, but I look at it now, I'm like, oh God, they have no place to breathe. It's a tongue twister. The way I set the text most of the time is great. It's a mood piece. As a mood piece, it works great. I think that's what was just cool about it. It has some body percussion, which I still do all the time. Yeah, so that was good. It was attractive. It was in French, and people are still like, it's in competition, regional competition.
Wow, that's awesome.
So people still purchase it, being like, that's a tough piece. Let's do that. So that came out, and then I had a request from Reno, Nevada, from Bella Voce. And they were like, oh, we'd like to commission you. I was like, sure, okay. I wrote the piece, and they had a grant. I'd never had touched grant money before, so they flew me to Reno, Nevada. This is me from Montreal, like, going to Reno, Nevada.
Wow. And you hit all the strip clubs just immediately.
I mean,
you blew all your grant money on strippers, and then you were never asked to be commissioned again.
Well, I got sunburnt at a baseball game in May, which is a new, like, this never happens in Canada. You do not get sunburnt in May. What the heck? And then like, you have game stations like in the airport. That was particular for me. But otherwise, I didn't go to any of like the big centers in Reno. It was like the homes, the schools, like just workshops, things like that. What was really intense was that when they performed the piece, I was sitting there and all I could feel was shame, because I kind of knew what the vocal range was. Katie's laughing. I don't know why.
She was laughing at the stripper joke.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I knew like what's the highest note people can sing and what's the lowest note people can sing. And when I say people, I mean people that have female range or higher range. They're not. I don't think they were all women, but the higher range. And yeah, I didn't know that different sections of the voice have different quality. So I would have the sopranos singing high notes too often.
Yeah.
It sounded rough for them. They sounded tired really fast. And I felt like I took the text and I was just trying to spit it out as fast as possible just to go through it. It's like, I don't know how to write for choir. So what happened is after that, I remembered a counsel that told me in high school, if you want to write for an instrument, you play that instrument. If you want to write for an ensemble, you perform in that ensemble. So I was like, I need a choir. And lucky for me, I joined a really good upper voice chamber choir, really competitive, where they would learn everything by heart for all the concerts. It was like 20 pieces per concert. It was conducted by Ewan Edwards, and I did not know he was like a Grammy Award winning conductor. Like,
wow.
No reason.
And what choir is this?
Concerto della Donna. He's retired now, but the alumni of the group created Iglesia, which is now the piece, the choir I'm composer in residence for. So I started that way. It was just like I felt really bad that my piece was just hard for them. Like, they worked so hard at it and they did a great job, but I was just like, oh shoot, I did it wrong. So I was hoping I could learn more about choir, and I did, because after singing like 60 some pieces by heart in less than a year, you're like, oh, I'm understanding this a little more now. Okay. These textures that are really good. And like just discovering some of the new music and realizing, oh my gosh, choirs tend to sing new music. And this is very particular, because you'll like, I know there's this thing in a lot of the more classical stage music world, that people will be performing more of the classical pieces, Baroque pieces, romantic pieces. There's a huge body of interesting works that already have been written, and a lot of the audience members that go to these concerts don't want to listen to
they don't want
new
to take
music.
A chance. Yeah.
Don't want to take a chance, because we go really all out when we experiment with instrumental music, which is fun. Some of us love it, some of us hate it.
I wonder if part of it too has to do with just the length. Like a choral song is typically like 3-4 minutes, but an orchestral piece will be about 20.
Yeah,
so
I wonder.
Part of it is just the nature of like, I'll take a chance for 3 minutes, but I won't take a 20-minute chance.
It might be. Yeah, you're right. That's a good observation.
I also really like that you talked about the feeling of shame as a composer, because I think this is not talked about often, but that's often my feeling. And it's hard to say, because you're so grateful for the experience and the opportunity and your performers, and like, But that's a very common feeling for me too. When I see my work performed, I just hear everything that's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I feel, it makes me feel guilty. It's not like,
Yeah.
it's not so much like, oh, I'm so bad. It's more like these poor people
Yeah.
are such good performers and they had to like just make this piece work that doesn't work. And for sure, I'm never invited here again. Or like, I don't, it's more of like a, yeah, the feeling is like deep shame. And that's such a shame because, and I have noticed that too, as I've been teaching, like in the, like music composition and songwriting, like I think because no one talks about it, people feel so isolated and what they bring. And I feel like I've created enough of a warm community where people feel comfortable, but often they'll bring something that's usually their best piece and say like, this is a piece of shit. I hate this piece. Everyone is going to hate me for this piece. You're going to kick me out of the group and then I'm going to die alone. But here's my piece. And
I
like,
laugh
I just
because
I'm like, you're in the right place. I mean, hopefully we'll find a way to not feel that way. I keep trying to find different modalities to like just banish that feeling forever if possible, but I don't know if it is possible. I think it's that there's this vulnerability there that is maybe a good thing. But I keep thinking like there's got to be a way to redirect that vulnerability so that it's like all parts of the process are more enjoyable somehow. I don't know if am I ever going to find that, but I appreciate that you like brought that up because I think that it's, you know, people assume that like, oh, you had the courage to write a piece and put it out there. You must be so confident. Like,
I know.
Yeah.
But I think the more you do it, the more you realize that that's just part of the process. Yet, like,
yeah, more than anything, that's the thing. I'm like, oh, we're in the part of the process where we think we're going to die alone. Okay, I remember this part. This is about 75% of the way through, and then usually at 80% something shifts. So we just got to ride out this.
Yeah, right now in the piece I'm writing, I'm at like the 30% mark where like you have a great idea and you're like, oh, and you have this high being like, oh, this is wonderful. And then you hit a wall and you're like, this is not, wait, that means I can't continue with my original idea. Why? No, it's like, I'm so sad and I have to go somewhere else. And then you have like 3-4 days where like, I'm going to try to keep going where I wanted to go. Oh, it's not working. Oh, I'm a horrible person. I can't do this properly. Bad composer. I can't even take this text and like set it properly. This text sucks. It's got a horrible meter to it. I can't work it. And like you go through all the emotions.
Right.
Yeah, I'm right there right now.
You should make a little short film about it's like the stages of grief, but like for a composer, it's like the stages of composing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why, going back to your question of do I prefer writing fast with a very fast deadline? I don't. Because it's so intense to go through all of those intense.
So fast,
So fast, you are exhausted. I was so sick after I finished writing that piece in Banff. I was just like constant flu, sinus infection. It was just boom, boom. I was so tired. So that was too much for me, and I don't regret it. But I know that speed is not good for me. 2 weeks, yes. 4 days. Hi, Mona.
My battery's low. Let me take my. I gotta shift the headphone into the charger. This is a very DIY situation.
Making me think I should see what my battery's at.
Do you have any advice for like beginner, let's say 10-year-old Marie-Claire, comes to you, Marie-Claire, and is like, I want to be a composer when I grow up. How do I start?
Well, first off, I don't know how to counsel a young person that age because there's a lot of play.
So you know,
right?
you. So just
I just give myself a bunch of challenges, like write a piece in this style, write a piece in that style. You hear that melody, write it down and like do something. Try to see how it's built to get like take it apart and play with it. Just play around with the sounds and like yeah, exactly. So instead of waiting until you've got a certain age where you feel like the art you do, you are dependent on the result of your art so that you can eat and have your next gig, which can be stressful if you see it in that light. So I know there's a lot of people that end up not pursuing a career in art because they see that it takes the fun out of it. But I would wager that we who manage to make a career out of it, sometimes we lose the fun. So the more you can have fun with it right off the bat and just not be afraid of failing, just making weird sound and just being like, oh, look at what that did, instead of being like, oh, I wrote something that the quality's horrible. Yeah, I would say just like, if you can give yourself deadlines and be like, I want to write a piece today, or I want to write, I want to be able to write, I want to write for 2 hours, right? So for the next 2 hours, I'm going to play with sounds. Yeah, so I wish.
Sounds like a heavy dose of curiosity.
Yeah, and I tend to be way too goal-oriented as a person, so that's why the deadlines are really good for me. But it's by having those deadlines that I then all of a sudden discover a few peaceful moments where I find myself playing with the sound. I'm lucky to have 1 or 2 of those moments while I'm writing a piece. Sometimes I don't, which is really sad. So if you can cultivate that from the beginning, whether you make it your career or not, just figuring out how to just play with things and not being afraid of it coming out and being really shitty. That's okay. That's part of it. It's part of the experimentation. So yeah.
Love that idea of recapturing play, or even better, not ever losing it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what Banff did for us, for all of us, actually.
Yeah.
With a heavy dose of stress, but it was still like,
yeah.
It was all things all at once. So curious, just for myself, what do you do for fun?
That's my problem.
I know you draw. I've seen some of your, I can't remember what the app is. There's like this virtual drawing app that I've seen you do really cool stuff on.
Yeah, Procreate.
Procreate. Are you
That's
still
fun.
like that?
Yeah, less. That was more at the beginning of the pandemic, when I had a little more time, and I would sit down while, I would sit down and steal Chad's iPad and draw for maybe an hour or 2. But that's because I found tutorials. Like I found this one YouTuber that does these really fantastic little tutorials of like, do this very simple drawing of a light bulb, and it's like,
will you send me that YouTuber? Because I tried to learn Procreate for a second. I was like, this is not intuitive.
Oh, she's a lot of fun. I used to draw graphic novel. I used to want to draw graphic novels as a kid, and I played, we were talking about capturing play. That's what I would do for fun. As a teenager, I just like developed this whole world and story and whatnot, and I was drawing them all the time. Like, this is my library, and I have like an entire cubicle and a half of, that's not a cubicle, that's just a cube. I have a whole unit and a half of those, like below here, just full of like these old drawings I can't get rid of because they're like the story I created as a kid and teenager. It was play. That was play for me. And my parents even sat down with me at one point. They're like, you get to choose. Do you want to be a musician or do you want to draw? And whatever you pick, just make sure that that's where you're putting your energy. It's good that you're playing, but right now you're playing more than you say you want to be a violinist, but you never practice and you're drawing 8 hours a day. And it's like, okay, well,
I feel like this is a moment to like re-envision your future as playful and musician.
I know. I'm saying this now.
Like,
don't know.
Could you make like musical graphic novels? I feel like there's a love of narrative, clearly, from like you love to play with words. Your mom was a singer-songwriter. Like, you love stories. You love graphic novels. I know that there's like a whole other world. Like, were you the one who was into sci-fi stuff, or not quite?
Yes, to a certain degree. It was me, and I don't know who else. I just enjoy entering a world, whether I'm on the receiving end or participating in it and discovering that world. So that can be in any type of art, but it needs to have a really good story, and it needs to have really good writing, really good dialogue. So I'm a story person. So I don't like exploring music and just the sounds of music. I like exploring how can music represent something.
Right. It's like, so that's where I think your drawing comes in, right? Because like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, just like writing notes, it's very just like shapes. We're just like shape noting
yeah,
concepts that then
yeah.
turn into. It's so. This is interesting. I don't know exactly where this is going, but I feel like there's this world that might open up. Maybe you would like invent a whole new kind of like musical narrative that has yet to exist by bringing these things, all these aspects together. But I do think there's something. I used to draw and paint a lot more
Mm.
than I do now, and sometimes I go back to it. Often, I'll try to journal every morning, but
Yeah.
often it just like turns into me like coloring shapes and stuff.
Oh, that's great
And
though.
I'm like, interesting. How does your brain do that? Like, I guess technically words are just shapes that represent sounds.
Yeah.
So maybe coloring are just also shapes that could represent sounds. And when I talked to actually Anna Klein, the composer in residence at Chicago Symphony when I was an undergrad, I spoke with her, I think like once, but I was watching her very closely because I was like, ooh, a woman composer at the CSO. That's so cool. I didn't know like we could get that far. You know?
Yeah.
She talked a lot about, she's also a painter, and when she was coming up with a new piece, because I was always, in undergrad, I was like, how do you write a 20-minute piece? Like, that's such a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
piece than writing a 4-minute piece. Like, I can't,
Hmm.
my method didn't scale to 20 minutes. So I was like, I have
Yeah.
to figure out, like, how are they conceptualizing writing a larger piece? And she would put, like, paper all over her walls and then draw out the piece first. So kind of, like, draw the journey. And so I started doing that, and it really helped me kind of, like, take a really expansive amount of time and shrink it into like visual objects so that I could kind of like see it in one view instead of, you know, when you're writing on the computer or you're writing by hand, you feel like you have to scroll a lot. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
this amount of information is actually only 5 seconds. So like if I want to see the 20 minutes, I have to like zoom way out. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's something there, I think. And I remember there was a point where I was like, well, maybe the answer is new notation. There's a bunch of books on
Hmm.
like new music notation, but it didn't really hit the mark for me. Like I appreciated the exploration into like, oh, so maybe we, I don't know, make more different types of squiggly lines, and then we have like a little guide of like, well, this type of squiggly line actually means this. I was like,
Yeah.
well, maybe. And then there's a bunch of scores from
Not
the
quite.
70s that are just kind of like picture books that people read off of, but it's like too
Yeah.
experimental.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not specific enough for me. I don't know. Spectralist composers I appreciated a lot, which I feel like I'm kind of starting to delve into.
Yeah. Murray Schafer did some cool things too. Like he's
Oh,
got
that's
this
right. I
beautiful.
hadn't heard of him until Banff, actually.
Oh yeah, so he's got a piece called Snowforms where you've got like first of all the score is long, kind of portrait landscape, but like legal size almost. It's this beautiful turquoise color, like cardboard, and then it's kind of it looks like painted lines. So he's got his timing. So he's got a line and then the seconds on top, and then the rest is just um, it's all painted in a white, and you've got the thickness of the line is how loud it needs to be. So if it's really thin, then it's very quiet. If it's thick, it's very loud. And then he'll once in a while put like the names of notes, so like E, F, G, whatever, where what you're aiming for approximately. And then you can see the textures. It's so cool. So like you can see if it's just a melody that's flowing, you can see the shape of the melody. Or you can see if everyone's doing all kinds of scattered. So it's still limited, but that for me was really cool to see that at first and just be like, okay, yeah, I can this would actually that looks like what I would do when I need to draw a piece before I actually put notes to them when I draw a shape. I don't do it often. Sometimes I do it though, just to make sure I have a climax, to make sure that what is the journey? Do I need a climax? Is this a mood piece? And therefore, is there a variety in textures? Yeah, so that's fun. I don't do it often enough just because most of the time I'll follow what the text is telling me to do. I usually take text that is already pre-existing, and then I will set music to it. When I have to create a piece from scratch, so like the piece I did in Banff, or a piece for which I don't know if I told you, this summer I wrote a piece where I wrote my own text.
Yay! Oh, I saw something about that, but I don't remember the context.
And I definitely had textures in my head before I wrote the text. So then I did get to shape everything like you do as a songwriter. You have, like, you create everything at the same time. I just don't have enough confidence with the words. Like I said, you should always, you try to play with the sounds of music so that you have a variety of things you can delve from when you're writing your music. Well, same thing needs to happen with text, and I have not played with text. Again, my husband loves text. He's always playing with words all the time, but he has not offered. I think if he were to write text for me, it'd be humor all the time. But yeah, so it was really scary to write my own text this summer. Also, the context in which it was written was very scary. It was about Katherine Johnson, who is the mathematician at NASA. She passed away in 2020. And I started working on the piece. And then for those of you who don't know, she's also African American. So I started working on the piece in May. And then the protests hit. And I was like, should I be doing this? So it took me a few months to just step back, see what was going on, and then just inform myself and ask other people in the community that I know, that I trust, and other people that I didn't know but that I know have, like, good, they're active artists in our community. And just the general feeling that I got, the general message that I got from them was, look, as long as you're not trying to imitate our culture in any way, shape, or form, you're just telling this lady's story, that's fine. Right. It's, as long as it's your style, that's fine. You're telling her story. You read her biography, her autobiography. You're taking some of her words, and, like, literally, I didn't take any of her paragraphs or anything. I just took one thing that her father told her, one sentence. I am no better than anyone, but no one is better than me. Apparently, she just kept saying that to everybody, to herself, and that helped her, like, become the first woman / African American woman to be a research mathematician at NASA for, like, and calculating all kinds of things like the moon landing and other, like, the first manned flight, just wow. Yeah, flight trajectory and everything. I just found that cool. And she would play with numbers.
Oh, interesting.
She said as a kid, it's, like, written right there in her book. She says, she says numbers would follow me everywhere I went, and she would just, like, she would find comfort in counting things and just, like, playing with numbers and seeing what the numbers would do if she did this or that. I'm like, she's an artist with numbers. I love this. So I had this connection with this person, and so the artists around from in the choral community, or African Americans from the States, and Black artists from Canada, and there were just, I spoke with a few of them and just saying, yeah, just it sounds like you find her interesting and that you're gonna honor her. Just do it your way, not a fake our way, your way. So, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then it was parsing the fact that she's a mathematician and everything, and I thought I could just write a piece about that. But it turns out everything about her story, her identity, is not just a mathematician. It's not just a woman. She's also African American. So I was like, great, I'm gonna have to talk about that. I'm gonna have to write text about that, but I'm not African American. So, yep, ask for help, reach out. Don't be afraid to just go out and be like, I don't know how to do this. Can I do this? And then people around you will tell you very honestly. I sent my text to, like, 3 different people, and they caught things I had written that weren't very good and that I didn't know. So, and I'm not talking about the quality of the text. I'm talking about, obviously, the meaning of the text. So, and that was my first experience of writing my own text.
Wow, so intense. I love, though, that, like, she said numbers followed her around.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool, because I was thinking, like, oh, what has followed me around forever? Always melodies. Melodies are always just, like, all around. And, like, word combinations.
Oh, that's great.
I love word combinations. So that's interesting. What about you? What do you feel like follows you around?
It's constantly music. I have music in my head so often that when I have somebody, either when I would have roommates whistle or hum, or when I have my poor husband whistle or hum, I go, too much music. So yeah, definitely music.
I love it. Well, this was awesome. Where can people find more of your work? Everyone has to listen to Constellations. That's, like,
oh yeah,
my favorite choral pieces ever. It's performed at Banff.
But
Performed lovely. I loved how it was performed with Banff, and I love how it was conducted in Banff too. The
it was really fun to sing too.
Mm.
Which
It was
enjoyable. As a performer, I'm always like, is this fun to sing? Am I writing something that's fun to sing?
Oh,
I'm always answering.
yeah. That's a whole other dimension. Yeah, that stuff can be heard on my SoundCloud, but even easier is just go on my website. So just my full name, no hyphens, no dots, nothing, no underscore, just Marie-Claire Saindon. And then, well, you can, I do believe I have a link to my website on my Instagram page.
Yeah,
like in my bio, right?
So follow you on Insta and link to the page.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. What is, you know how like sometimes podcasts have like this final question and it's really cool and it's always the same? I don't have that yet, but I have been asking people what they believe their superpower is, and I kind of like the responses I'm getting. So what's your superpower?
Oh, jeez. It's definitely not being put on the spot, that's for sure. Oh, my superpower has to do with being able to find structure in everything. I will find a pattern in everything, and I will organize everything for you, even if it doesn't need to be organized. Yeah.
Love it. INTJ. Love it. Are you an INTJ? INFJ?
INFJ. That was close. Yeah, I'm an INFJ. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a very emotional person that likes to organize your stuff. Yeah. Thanks. Hi, Kyla. Bye, Kyla. Kyla's, just so you know, Hope, Kyla's a person who is also a songwriter, and she is extremely creative, and I wish I could play around with sound and ideas like she does. And she also has a wonderful sense of shoes. She loves
it. A songwriter with a wonderful sense of shoes. That's got to be in your bio. That's got to be the first. This is awesome. Cool. Well, anyone who should be interested in finding Marie-Claire's music because it's so good. So click on her link in her bio and go to her website and listen and stream and talk with her and start communication, because clearly you're very open to communicating, which is awesome.
I am.
If you're interested in the Songwriters Lab, there's only like 24 hours to sign up. So click on her bio and sign up really, really fast. Otherwise, you're not going to get a chance. Okay, well, we'll talk more, and I love seeing you at the orchestration hangs every month, so I'll see you more there.
Perfect.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself and your soul and your thoughts.
My pleasure. Thank you for talking with me. It's so easy to just talk about these things with you. I love it. I hope that the songwriter stuff goes fantastic with your new team of people that are going to get their bums kicked.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome.
Kicking. Yes. Okay. We'll talk soon. Have a lovely day, and happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.